So the Timberwolves season is over as they've lost to the Spurs in the second round, and heading into this offseason, they have a lot of questions they need to ask themselves. Even though they took this 62-win blossoming juggernaut that is the Spurs to 6 games, this series wasn't all that competitive. Not to shortchange Minnesota, but the Wolves got a really bad offensive game from Wemby in Game 1, and then eked out a win in Game 4 when Wemby got ejected for karate chopping Naz Reid in the neck. But outside of that, the games that the Spurs won in this series were convincing. Not all quite Game 6 convincing, but more or less demonstrating that the Wolves just really weren't on their level. For Minnesota, I do think it's important, even after an ugly blowout loss in a must-win game, to not overreact. This postseason was pretty successful for the Wolves, all things considered. They beat Denver, exposed all their weaknesses, and they lost Dante to a torn Achilles, Io dealt with calf and heel pain after the first round, and Ant was clearly hobbled, having hyperextended his knee, and they still got within 2 wins of their 3rd consecutive Western Conference Finals appearance. That's nothing to scoff at. But the difficult question that Minnesota and every other Western Conference team needs to ask themselves is, how do we not just get better, but contend with OKC and San Antonio going forward? Because the West looks like it's going to be a stranglehold between those two teams for years to come. I think the Wolves really need to upgrade their talent offensively, just across the board, and the biggest part of that is Julius Randle. I love him. Sarge, as a Knicks fan, I'll never forget what you did for us, but he's just too flawed and inconsistent to be a championship level number 2. This has become a recurring issue where he really falls off a cliff against super physical teams that can switch everything, like the Thunder last year and the Spurs this year. And moving off of Randle is of course easier said than done, as I don't imagine there's a very big market for him out there. He's getting paid $35 million next season on an expiring deal, so it's not a pariah of a contract. It also means it's not strangling the Wolves' salary like a $50 million contract would, but the goal is still to improve, and it's not going to be easy to move off Randle for a player that's also better than him. So I'll just put this out there, as much as I think we all know the Wolves have to upgrade from Julius Randle, don't be surprised or angry at them if he's still on the roster next season. Minnesota might have to attach assets to Randle to get rid of him, and then that just hurts their ability to build a contender in this tough of a West, so the whole thing is pretty brutal and, of course, very difficult to pull off. The Wolves' depth is obviously this team's strong suit. It was hurt by all the injuries, and Dante really makes a meaningful difference towards this team's 3-point shooting abilities, but guys like Kyle Anderson, Jalen Clark, Bones Hyland, if you could just get better offensive talent that can actually play meaningful postseason minutes, that would be huge. And I think a specific role the Wolves need to upgrade is getting an elite guard defender. Look, guarding Wemby is its own thing, but the Wolves really struggled to contain any of the 3 Spurs guards throughout this entire series. And don't get me wrong, the Wolves are a great defense, but they don't have a great individual guard defender. No offense, but Mike Conley is just too damn old, and Ant isn't committed to that end of the ball enough. Jaden McDaniels has great length, but isn't ideal for that matchup, plus he and Rudy Gobert are off doing more important things on defense, and that just leaves the Wolves without the ability to really stop a quick guard. And the biggest improvement the Wolves need to make internally is develop better habits. I know that can sound corny, but the Wolves are one of the most inconsistent effort teams in the league, and have been consistently inconsistent for a couple of years now. Anthony Edwards said it in his post-game interview after losing Game 6, the regular season is for building those championship and playoff habits. Just because you're capable of reaching a certain level doesn't mean you'll be able to when the pressure is greatest, and especially if you haven't been building that repetition. The Wolves had some really bad giveaways during the regular season. They lost games they were in total control of, they weren't maxing out their rebounding as a team, they had turnover problems all season. They probably shouldn't have even been the 6th seed, they could have easily been the 4th or even 3rd seed. And then for as talented as he is and as much success as the Timberwolves have had so early into his career, Ant is clearly not at that apex level of having complete control over the game, and in particular is really lacking as a playmaker. I think he still has so much room to grow. He's 24, and again, the Wolves have experienced the most amount of postseason success they ever have over the past few years, and that's not something to overlook. But you never really feel like Ant takes over games with his decision making. It's really only ever as a scorer, which itself is subject to defensive coverages and variance. In the meantime, because that development isn't overnight or a between seasons type of thing that takes years and years, the Wolves really need to get Ant a point guard. Mike Conley and Ayo Dosunmu are just not good enough. I do actually love Ayo coming off the bench, so honestly it's really just Conley. But part of that maturation for Ant also has to be getting back to being more committed as a defensive player. He has the tools to be a hellacious defender, but is so frequently missing rotations, not getting back in transition, just not giving much effort on that end. It's extraordinarily hard to be an elite offensive player and also a plus on defense, but if Ant can contribute just a little bit more, be a little bit more engaged, that would make a meaningful difference. And then, I want to throw this out there. I've waited towards the end to say it because maybe I've just overthought this whole thing and it sounds really dumb, but for as much as Rudy Gobert is covering up so many defensive holes for this team, we're in the weak link era. Top teams can switch everything, help off of players who can't punish them, and Gobert's lack of offensive skill has consistently been something teams can attack. His presence in the paint crowds up lanes and makes it more difficult for Ant and Randle to get to the rim, causing them to settle more than they need to. Part of the settling is still on them, and again, Gobert is one of the best defenders in the world, so it's a real give and take. I don't know. It's far from being the Wolves' biggest concern or top priority, but it is a real issue Gobert teams tend to run into eventually. He's only got 2 more years left on his contract, so much like Randle, you probably just ride the 2 out in lieu of having better options. Overall, all of these hypothetical moves I've discussed are much easier said than done. Not to say none of it's realistic, I think the Wolves can definitely improve their overall offensive talent, but to be honest, it's not likely they seriously contend with the Thunder or Spurs in the immediate future. OKC and San Antonio have just raised the bar to such a ridiculous height. If you want to beat their historic roster, you basically have to build a historic roster of your own. The landscape of the West has changed. The Wolves, as currently constructed, were built to beat the Denver Nuggets, and they did, twice. But now the teams to beat are not just elite two-way teams unlike the Nuggets, they're these athletic, all-time great defenses with much different superstars at the helm. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of smart moves, not just going right, but exceeding expectations to build a roster that can really compete. In the meantime, they'll probably remain in that second tier of contenders in the West, alongside the Lakers and Nuggets, and you could throw the Rockets in there too if you really want to be optimistic. But teams that will be slowly working towards building those rosters and are essentially biding their time, waiting for an opening or slip up from one of the 2 juggernauts, and probably don't stand a chance at winning a series over a healthy OKC or San Antonio for another half decade or so, until they either reach that point or salary caps and the second apron start bringing those 2 teams back down to earth. With all that said, the Wolves may not be able to compete with the Thunder or Spurs right now, but they're also not going anywhere. They can very reasonably be in the same position, win a first-round series, and really they can be anyone outside of those 2, so it's on them to maximize their regular season and give themselves a chance of not running into them until later rounds. As tough as it is to say, because Ant is such a promising bright spot within this new generation, but the first title window of his career might officially be closed. And by the time an Anthony Edwards team has a legit shot at winning the title again, that team is going to look very different. This is just the reality of the NBA today. It's never been harder to build a championship contender, especially while we're on the precipice of 2 budding dynasties. Alright, that's going to do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leaving a like would be super helpful and much appreciated. Let me know what kind of moves you'd like to see the Wolves try to make during this offseason. Check me out on TikTok. I post every day, multiple times a day. I also post a lot on Twitter and write on Substack and Medium. I'm really trying to grow, so the engagement means everything. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and see you in the next one.